So, hello and welcome to asicast episode 157. And joining me today is Magnus Anselm of MMS, who measure television and video audiences in Sweden. Now, a couple of podcasts ago, I interviewed Barb's Justin Sampson. So this is a great opportunity to get a Swedish perspective on where measurement is headed. So welcome to the podcast, Magnus.
Thanks a lot. It's an honor to having me.
Now, there's been a lot of debate in recent months about what TV currencies should be measuring and what they should not be measuring. And MMS recently announced an expansion of the service in Sweden, describing it as total video measurement. So what are you now measuring and what's on the roadmap in terms of video measurement of content and of advertising?
In terms of scope, it's still very, very wide. So it's actually all video on all platforms and all screens. So our scope and our mission is really, really wide. What we are actually measuring is mainly now BVOD and some of the online publishers and their short clips, including their short clips.
Okay. And I know that you've been working with Google in Sweden over the last 5 years in partnership, but recently that relationship came to an end. Can you shed some light on what you were hoping to achieve, what the goals of the collaboration were and why it didn't happen?
Yeah, the main reason obviously is that they're, in terms of viewing time, the third biggest player in the market. So to exclude them, considering our wide scope, it's not really, more or less, not possible. So the business decided together to include them and to set up a special solution for measuring YouTube. And we agreed, and we worked very, very closely and very well together in a dialogue with the business, all players in the market, the buying side and also of course the media side. But in mid 22, I would say, it started to change. And the thing was that we have agreed on a metric also with the qualifiers of duration and things like that. And all of a sudden it changed, and it was a global decision from Google saying that using the qualifiers that we agreed on would not be accepted. So they tried to pressure us on that issue and tried to push it down to less than 1 second viewing should be qualified as reach, and that was not the industry decision. So that wasn't possible at all. So the main reason was actually their change of perspective when it comes to the metrics that should be used in order to capture all viewing, all formats and all platforms.
So this was a global decision that impacted your particular relationship in the sense that globally you were told that YouTube are looking to measure sub-second, I don't know what that would be, picosecond or nanosecond audiences. Is that correct? That this is you were under the impression this is a global mission from YouTube to measure less than 1 second? Because even the MRC guidelines, which I know a lot of broadcasters are skeptical about, is 2 seconds, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they would agree on 1 second, but they want to push it to shorter and shorter, and they didn't tell me, but I know that the main reason was TikTok nagging in their tail, so to speak. So Before, the approach was more that we're a part of an industry with different kinds of content, long format, short format, professional, and user generated. So not only fit for TV, fit for all screens, so to speak. But it's obvious that also the launch of YouTube Shorts, it's a way of kind of handling the competition from TikTok.
I mean, this is potentially pretty significant, because there's always been, the last few years, this pressure point between the native digital video companies and the broadcasters around minimum definitions. And initially the battle lines have been drawn around 2 seconds MRC minimum. If it's going even lower than that, I wonder if the sides, if they can be described as sides, are pulling even further apart in terms of the metrics. It's an interesting situation, and it's something we're definitely going to be exploring over the next few months and at our event in November. And it seems to us that there's really 3 key issues that this highlights surrounding video measurement, and it'd be good to try and unpack them with you. The first is highlighted by that YouTube experience, which is duration. Given that it's so essential for a currency to define a reasonable minimum threshold that defines an impression or a contact. I mean, we can look, obviously you can measure how long that contact is, but a lot of things like reach calculations are driven by an agreement around what constitutes an impression or a contact. Do you think a compromise can ever be reached if we're going to get total video? Then presumably there is going to have to be some agreement on what a minimum contact actually is.
I think so, and I think actually that we did reach that before, but we might not reach a mutual agreement that everyone would embrace. But most of the business, even though we're measuring so much different kinds of content and different length, but it's one possibility. Of course, it's to have one qualifier for shorter and one for longer formats. That has been discussed, and so on. But when we come down to 1 second or even less, I think it is actually ridiculous. And I think if the advertisers haven't been standing in, giving their perspective, I would say that it's time. And they did here also. So they said that less than 2 seconds are not relevant at all for us to buy any kind of possible exposure. So I think the way forward is that the buying side need to be more active, and in terms of that, of course, the WFA and North Star initiative is good, but they need to be in the driver's seat in that case, I think.
I mean, it's interesting that the WFA guidelines around the cross media measurement, primarily cross-platform video measurement, I reference the MRC guidelines around 2 seconds and viewability. I'm just wondering aloud if, given that you're saying that certainly the advertisers in Sweden were pushing back on the idea of sub-second, lower than a second thresholds, whether this may be a question of YouTube pushing the envelope and raising the idea of sort of nanoseconds in order to have people more likely to compromise on the 2 second. If you see what I mean, that doesn't seem too bad now. It's almost like, well, if you think 2 seconds is bad, try 0.1 seconds. I don't know.
It's like negotiating upon metrics.
Yes, yeah. I think that the duration is going to be a huge issue. I mean, I know that, and this relates also specifically to measurement technology, because it also is predicated on the assumption that the measurement technology can measure accurately audiences of less than a second, which is easier on a router meter than it is obviously on a people meter, where you're reliant on encoding or audio matching to actually detect what's going on. So it's not just a question of what the ideal is, but also what's physically capable of being measured. And it's somewhat bizarre that we know in some markets like the US and Canada, they're still trading on whole ad breaks. So we do seem to be at a bit of a existential crossroads in terms of how we define a contact and how we define an ad. I think the other existential question is one that I discussed with Justin Sampson a couple of podcasts back, which is about the perceived importance of quality environments. And certainly Barb in the last month have been talking about their new definition of what they're measuring following their consultation with the industry in the UK, which is this definition of fit for TV as a clear dividing line between television and social video. Are we effectively saying that TV and online video are different media, and where does that leave attempts at total video measurement? I know Sweden has been one of the leading countries for the last decade in talking about the objective of total video measurement. Is that objective still possible?
I think it is possible, but I think the industry might push for different reporting, more like that, having fit for TV or TV-like content in one reporting, and then other video in another reporting. That would be possible, but I still think so, and it actually comes down to time spent and eyeballs, because they compete with one another. So I think it is possible, but if we interpret total video, all videos should be a part of the currency, I don't think that's realistic, because it's a divergence going on in the industry, where some players, especially the big global ad tech players, they go more and more for first party data and say that we could cooperate if you receive our data, you validate it, and you put it into a currency. So that it's. We were having a convergence for a long time, but right now I see more of a divergence in the marketplace, and that is a risk in the perspective of trying to capture all viewing on all kinds of TV content or video content.
It's also interesting the last few months that there's if there is this sort of definitional divide based around duration and the perceived relevance of a quality environment, and the assumption that that has a beneficial impact on the advertisement and the viewer who's seeing that ad, then it's interesting that divide may not be quite as straightforward, because with the launch of advertising tiers on Disney Plus and Netflix, and presumably other services to come. It's interesting that you can see those companies are also positioning themselves now very much in the quality video environment and the long form advertising environment, which may actually put them, despite them being digital global players, may actually put them in the long run closer to the broadcaster view of how to sell and trade advertising than to YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, etc. Do you think that's a valid? I mean, have you had any conversations with those players in Sweden?
Not much in recent years, actually. They know that the door is open, but that they haven't been knocking at the door for a while. But I think the issue here is divided into two things. It's if it has some kind of quality in terms of editorial quality, that's of course one thing. But the other thing, actually, I think is context for the advertisers, and that's an issue that I see being brought up more and more often. Not saying media is a vehicle where we transport our branding. It doesn't matter as long as it reaches the consumer. It doesn't matter what kind of vehicle it is. To more of, we're prepared to pay a little extra for context. It started with brand safe. We want to avoid some kind of context, but it seems like it has turned a bit towards that context actually is important for a kind of a holistic way of looking at the exposure and the consumption. I think also I know that Peter Fields and Les Benny, they have done a lot of interesting things related to that, and that's actually something that is being brought up here on a local market by the Swedish Advertisers Association.
I guess related to that, in the last asicast, we chatted with my colleague Brian Jacobs chatted with Karen Nelson Field about the latest developments in the measurement of attention, which I guess is related to this whole idea that context matters. Is attention a big issue in Sweden at the moment?
It is, but it's actually outside the MMS scope, because our mission is just to measure viewing, not what's happening. So not the next step of the stair, but it might pop up, because attentive reach, I mean, then you're still at reach. If it's attention, you're one step above what our mission is to capture. But it is a big issue. It's a raising importance, and people are discussing it. And for us, of course, it could be that people start to say reach is pretty relevant, but not relevant enough. We want to go for attention.
Interesting. The third sort of hot topic at the moment is the measurement of online video advertising, as opposed to at a platform level and a content level, specifically that on the broadcast streaming services. We've seen the launch of C-Flight in the UK, and a few podcasts back we discussed the TT-VAM system in Finland, both of which have been developed outside of the term currency, driven by the broadcasters themselves. What's the current direction of travel in Sweden for measuring your clients' online video advertising?
We've included that in the total video for a while. So they've been a part of the same online video currency for a while, and we are bringing it together now. So that is not a real issue yet, but there's a discussion if the online video currency is really sustainable because of all the work that you have to put in to the SDKs and to kind of maintenance, I would say. So it's more and more, because we also include viewing at the telcos, the major telcos in their TVE services. That is included in the online video currency. And you can imagine if a major broadcaster, they distribute their content at the biggest telco operators TV service, and they need to make the telco technicians to include the SDKs and to update them and so on. So it was a long answer, but so far it's not much of C-Flight or the Finnish setup yet, but I think around the corner we might have it.
I guess both of them reflect is how far you can go with panel-based measurement before you have to start looking at using ad server data and turning that into people, as opposed to turning panelists into viewers of the actual ads that are being measured through the panel, and the interaction between the two, because obviously both play an important role. Well, it'd be interesting to see how you develop on that front. Obviously, many of the things we've talked about, we're going to be talking about at our conference in November, which seems quite a way away, but it's only 8 months, and we're definitely in the planning stages right now. From your perspective, what are the other, if there are any other hot topics in media that are keeping you and MMS awake at night that we should be exploring over the next 8 months?
I think you touched upon almost all of them, but there's a risk thing that I want to bring up. It is that it seemed like more and more non-broadcasters wanted to get in and wanted to work together, and in order to see what we could develop together and so on. But it seems like it's a tendency to leave rather than to involve and to invest more. And it's not only the YouTube example, it's also like some online publishers on the Swedish market. But in general, I think we're in a crossroads now, where decision has to be made. And that, in that perspective, the Fit for TV perspective is interesting, because it's what is the scope and so on. And the other thing is that including big data to validate that, to use that as a component in the currency, it's really crucial. And then, of course, related to this, the big SVOD services now being AVOD or HVOD. So that's obviously a big thing. And if they go their way into this, or if they embrace the established traditional way of looking at that. So it's
it's interesting on the with those HVOD. I don't think it's yet settled on how to describe them. I guess it depends how successful their AVOD services are, because my gut feel would be that if still 90% of their revenue is coming from subscriptions, then they probably at heart are SVOD, in the same way that some broadcasters have subscription services, but still, the vast majority of their revenue comes from advertising. But I guess there's a final existential question, which is, obviously, on the one hand, there is a fear from the broadcasters that these new advertising tiers on subscription services will eat into their revenues because it's more competition. On the other hand, if those platforms are embracing the broadcaster's definition of quality environments, that they are buying into and amplifying that argument, then on balance, you would think it makes sense for them to be more welcomed into the currencies, as opposed to the current, as we started the interview, the current dividing lines in terms of social video. But again, that's something we'll undoubtedly be picking up over the next few months. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us on the podcast. I know you've spoken at ASI and attended many times. I was quite surprised going back to find this is your first appearance on the podcast, I think. I'm not quite sure how we got through 156 episodes without you, but I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon. So thanks, Magnus.
Thanks a lot.